What happened to you when you were young that you didn't understand until years later? I'm a redhead, but neither of my parents or my brother is a redhead. So when we were out in public when I was young, a lot of people would ask where my red hair came from. One day, when I was probably 6 or so, my parents told me to start answering the question with "from the mailman," which I did constantly cause people always seemed to react to it. It wasn't till I got to high school that it clicked that the mailman in this scenario had not delivered my red hair in an envelope but that it had come from a much different package. I love that your parents encourage you to do this. It's something most parents would be mortified about, but they clearly thought it was hilarious. They sound like funny people. I'd get erections and I'd pull my pants down and pee long straight lines. I thought they were for peeing long distances. When I was 6 we used to play a lot with Pokemon cards at school. One recess I left my deck inside the classroom. When I came back my Charizard was missing from it. 3 days later a friend from class came to me and told me he found my Charizard outside in a bush. Took me 10 years to realize he stole it from me and then got cold feet and gave it back. When I was 7 and my brother was 4 a man came up to the backyard where we were playing and asked if we wanted to see the puppy in his van. My brother said yes and started to follow him. I grabbed my brother's arm and screamed very dramatically "no woo" until my parents came out. The man waved at my parents and then drove away. I felt a little embarrassed for overreacting by screaming no like that. Looking back, there is no way he wasn't a creeper. I asked my mom just now if she remembered that, and why she didn't report him to the police to let them know there was a potential kidnapper in the neighborhood. She said because he didn't actually do anything. When I was younger my house was messy and my mum only ever cleaned on special occasions and that was only certain rooms people were allowed in. I always thought this was completely normal. We had wine boxes holding up our couch and shoved right up our chimney which was covered by a fire screen. Our kitchen smelled of mold and rotting food. The benches and floors were covered in the source of the smell and other unidentifiable objects. My clothes used to sit in a washing basket so long after they were washed that they would start to grow fuzz. There was one room beside mine which was so overpacked with rubbish and toys that I could barely crack the door open. It was just filthy overall. No one ever saw this though, and if they did I can only imagine that my mum would have lost custody of me immediately, and I think she knew that. I lived like that until I was 12 and I didn't really understand what was happening until recently when watching an episode of Hoarders. It's kind of messed me up. I can't sleep unless my house is spotless and I constantly have panic attacks if I forget to clean something before leaving the house. Got told that grandma had a black eye because she had walked into a door. Okay, grandma. Years later, I realized that grandpa had given grandma a black eye. Grandparents are meant to be all warm and nice and friendly. In kindergarten I had a best friend named Daniel and we played with toy dinosaurs and traded them all the time. January comes around and I invite him to my birthday party I was having at my house. He never showed up that day, and my mom told me that day he wasn't going to be able to make it as well as he wouldn't be able to come to school again. Little kid me was like, okay, I'll see him later. He died in a car crash on the way to my birthday party. Frick. I hope I'm not late to the party. When I was about 6-7 wish I was looking for bugs in my backyard when I came across a super rare and badass praying mantis. Naturally I scooped it up and put it in my bug container. Later on I was looking for more bugs when I found yet another praying mantis. Lucky day. I was super excited and put it in the container with the other praying mantis. Both of them stood in there dead still and just kind of bobbed around like praying mantis do. I came back a few hours later and was appalled by what I found. The bigger mantis standing there as still as ever right on top of a praying mantis head and legs. I was super spooked. Was that mantis a killer? Did the smaller mantis fall apart or explode? What happened? It really weirded me out for a while. I'd say about 10 or so years later I found out that the female mantis eats the male after sex. I still don't know if I'm an accomplice to a murderer or a world-class wingman. Probably both. When I was around 6-7 years old my father used to grow these special tomato plants at the back of our garage hidden away from everything. And every time he took me back there I had to be very quiet and not tell the neighbors about them. When I was around 16 something clicked one day and I realized my parents were both growing marijuana. My mom had a serious drug problem my entire life. When I was in high school, I recognized the alcohol addiction. That was new and developed when I entered high school. In college she developed an obvious addiction to painkillers, which killed her when I was 19. I was talking to my dad, and he told me that her drug problems was the main reason for their divorce and why he fought so hard for custody yet still remained so friendly with my mom to be a prominent figure in my life. I was confused, because to me my mom's issues didn't start until I entered high school and she discovered alcohol, and my dad mentioned that he was talking about her addiction my entire childhood. He didn't realize when he said it that I was unaware of it, and he was incredibly upset that he told me that when I didn't know. He hated the idea of hurting my memory of my mom, who, despite her massive frick-ups, I still love. She was my mom. Even looking back now, I'm a bit shocked to learn all this, but it makes a lot of things make sense. When I was little I asked my mom why I was having erections and what they were. She said to me, "Don't worry sweetie, it happens to your father all the time." Looking back I am mortified. In my adolescence, telemarketers frequently called our house. My parents instructed my sister and myself to respond to questions like, "Is your mom dad home with cheesies in the shower?" Well, one summer day when I was 6, we got a telemarketer call. After I explained I was only a child and could subsequently not conduct business for the household, he asked, "Is your mom home?" I said, "Number. She's in the shower. What about your dad?" "He's in there, too." It was not until years later that I realized his sudden embarrassed laughing was caused by me accidentally making this guy think my parents were getting it on in the shower while their poor innocent son was home. I lost one of my teeth when I was 7 years old, and so I was so excited to get money and stuff from the tooth fairy. I put the tooth under the pillow and I was ready to get my prize for losing a tooth. The next morning, I woke up and the tooth was gone but no present. I went and told my dad about how I just got scammed from the tooth fairy and he was like, the tooth fairy had to run fast so she gave me the money to give to you. He then pulls out his wallet and gives me the $2 that the tooth fairy gave him. I was so happy but still wondered why the tooth fairy was in such a rush. $2. I got 50 cents, dang cheap but tooth fairy. When I was 6 and my brother was 4 we used to walk to our cousin's house which was 2 houses down. One evening, we asked our mother if we could go over and she said yes and lets us walk over by ourselves. While we're walking, this car drives up to us and asks if we knew where the nearest McDonald's was and if we'd like to come with him. I told him we weren't allowed to eat McDonald's without our mother's permission, and turned to get her to ask if we were allowed. She was already running outside to get us when the car sped off. I was around 15 when I was reminiscing with my family and she brought it up. Creepy realization. When I would stay at my grandmother's house, I had a bunch of VHS tapes about dinosaurs and stuff that I wanted to watch. Sometimes I'd get to watch them, but only if my grandpa was home. Memo always said you'll have to wait until Pepper gets back. I can't work that VCR. She also had all her soaps recorded on tape, and many times I saw her record them without my grandpa being home. She feigned incompetence so that she didn't have to watch my dinosaur movies, and I never realized it until I was an adult. It is the wise woman who plays the fool. Memo, you sly fox. I've done something similar to the kids I nanny. They have a trampoline and always want me to jump on it with them. Watching 6 kids takes enough of my energy, so I convinced them that I'm terrified to get on so they'd stop bugging me about it. In lower school I remember asking my parents for wife beaters aka sleeveless undershirts because I thought they'd make me look cool. My dad pulled me aside and explained to me that I shouldn't say that because there are women out there who have been abused and using that term could make them uncomfortable. I looked at mom and said, "Really? It's just a name for a shirt." I was met with an uncomfortable stare from her. It wasn't until a few years later that I was made aware that my dad was not my biological father, but a great man my mother met when I was a toddler. My biological father was an extremely abusive alcoholic, and my mother had to escape with me before I was even a year old. Frick the other dude. Dad refers to the man who raised you. Your dad is awesome. My abuse counselor had these 2 big plastic bins full of wet and dry sand in his office. Every session he would lock the door and tell me, "Pretend you're at the beach. You've got to take your shirt off at the beach." so I wouldn't. He'd give me a massage, which hurt because I was 6 and had no muscles to massage. It never went any further than that, but there was another counselor who would hide X-Men trading cards in his pockets and he would have me look for them. It's kind of messed up that these guys were abuse counselors. And maybe they still are. This was 23 years ago. I never understood that not everyone had people drop bags of groceries on their steps, while the people just rang the bell and drove away. Dawned on me as an adult that we were poor. Then I looked back at old pics and noticed all the signs. Tiny Christmas tree in the background. Disappointed faces on Christmas pics. No vacation pictures. Damn it. I'm gonna try to avoid having my kids live that way. The other part of that is I didn't realize how stressed my mom always was until I got older and realized not everyone's parents freaked out weekly and slammed doors and peeled off in their car, leaving their kids alone and scared. I specifically remember one incident where my mom, brother and I went to the grocery store, and while we were walking to the car my mom dropped the gallon of milk and it exploded all over the ground. My mom started crying and my brother said, "Don't cry over spilled milk, mom," kinda chuckling. I didn't understand at all. Now looking back, it hurts me to think how hard my mom was trying to keep everything together. She passed away at age 51 when I was 18. She had a rough adulthood. I live my life now hoping to become what she wanted me to be. She made tons of mistakes, but she was there for me on her own and she tried so hard. All you teens, take notice of how your parents act when they think you're not looking. You might be surprised to find they are very stressed and working super hard to make you happy, oftentimes with only frustration to show for it. I was cleaning chickens with my grandparents when I was a kid, probably about 10 years old. I was pulling out the insides and I found what I thought were 2 eggs that were growing inside the chicken. I got all excited and showed my grandma and told my mom about it when she picked me up. I noticed that they both had smirks that seemed odd when I told them about it. Years later I thought back about that time and realized that it was a rooster and those were his balls. I'm a male and I always wanted to pee out my butt like my mom did. One day I finally did it. I was later informed that it was diarrhea. Clearly you couldn't see the crap. 2 things. When I was in 1st grade, I got to go to a special pay class called motor skills every few weeks. It was fun. I loved it. Years later, I realized that I got selected for this class because I was clumsy. Around the same time, my sister went to vacation Bible school and made a napkin holder with the words, "Believe, Jesus saves." For many years, I thought that was an admonition to save napkins. Religion went in one ear and out the other for me. When I was about 10, my friend told me I needed to go into the hot tub and put my wiener up against the jet because it would feel really good. We had no idea what was going on and ended up concluding that we had invented the feeling, deeming it having a spermutation. Wasn't till years later that I realized I was just whacking it with the help of a high Reynolds number. Female here. One of my most embarrassing moments, though not at the time, was doing this when I was in my neighbor's pool with a bunch of people around. But my mom saw and yelled at me to stop, so naturally I responded, but it feels good in front of all these people I had grown up with. Thanks for reminding me of this horrifying moment. When I was little, I'd go see my grandparents and my grandpa would be in the basement building something or fixing something and I'd go down to see what was up. I'd say, "Grandpa, what are you doing?" and he'd look at me and say, "I'm building layovers to catch meddlers." It was years before I figured out that was a roundabout way of saying none of your business. My grandpa would just say, "Baking a cake," if you asked him what he was doing. He was never baking a cake. Defending my mom from my dad since he slapped her butt cheek in the laundry room when I was like 6 and supposed to be away with my grandparents. I was the hero, the cock-blocking hero. Carjacked with my cousin. I was 12, she was 16. Gun pointed at my head and everything. At the court hearing, they were caught. My lawyer person lady asked if I was aware that the 4 men who carjacked my cousin and I had intention to kidnap us, as the police found duct tape and rope in their getaway car and they fessed up to it. That was a heavy bomb dropped on me while I was testifying against them, but I never really understood how lucky I was until I was older. My mom used to always go through periods where she would mostly hide in her room, yelling like she was in agony, and other times she seemed totally fine, like a few days on, a few days off. I always assumed she was depressed as I have depression too. Turns out when my brothers and I went to her hometown for her funeral recently, I learned she was a drug addict. I had absolutely no idea. My younger brother and I were playing in the bathroom. We used to make potions mixing different soaps together and stuff. Usual weird kid stuff. One of the soaps we found was a bit different. It smelled like strawberry candy, and when dared to, my brother tasted it, said it was delicious. We figured we had hit the kid jackpot. Edible soap. We cheerily shared almost the whole bottle before my mom walked in and took it away from us. Kinda laughing but trying to remain stern while doing so. Fast forward a few years to my first visit to the stag shop, and I realize my brother and I had eaten almost a whole bottle of strawberry flavored personal lubricant. I was about 5-6 years old in a Calder store, defunct discount Sears wannabe store in New England. My mom and I were on the second floor, and I was a couple of steps behind her. I thought I saw her go down the escalator, so I did too to catch up. I couldn't find her. I looked around for a while fruitlessly. I was eventually approached by a lady who looked to be about 40 in a brown leather jacket. She asked if I was lost. She said she was a police officer and that my mom was outside. She led me toward the front entrance, as my mom called for me from the second floor. I went to my mom. Unless I remembered some details incorrectly, I think I was about to get kidnapped. This fact occurred to me when I was about 20. I just thought how nobody in this thread actually got kidnapped. Then I realized it would be irrelevant to the question and they probably wouldn't be able to tell anyone. Didn't really happen to me, but when I was 14 I suddenly realized that those two giraffes at the zoo when I was 7 that I shouted about to everyone else weren't giving each other piggybacks. Oh crap, that made me smile. That's great. My mom had this woman who stalked her when I was really little. I always just thought of her as the mean lady, but it wasn't until I was older that my parents explained to me just how crazy she was. She would show up to places we went and would watch us, call my parents all time, leave threatening letters, etc. Part of the reason why we moved from Mexico to the US was because my parents were afraid for my safety. Part of the reason why we moved from Mexico to the US was because my parents were afraid for my safety. Spoiler alert, you may not have run far enough. Dad used to have a shop in the basement where he would work on things in the evening. He used to smoke while he was down there, and I wasn't allowed to be in the shop because smoke is bad for kids. I used to sneak down covert style sometimes and he'd catch me and shoo me out, all while laughing and smiling. The smoke smelled different than regular smoke, but I was little and didn't think much of it. Years later when I first, knowingly, smelled pot, I instantly recognized the smell. Dad used to smoke pot in the basement every night. This really reminds me of something too. It wasn't someone we knew, I think, just a stranger on the street, but one day I asked one of my parents what weird kind of cigarette that person was smoking, and they said it was a herbal cigarette. It was several years later, well after I'd been taught about weed, that I suddenly put 2 and 2 together. I was about 4 and my cousin, like a sister though, had just gotten married. I was very close to her since she used to babysit me all the time. When the couple visited us for the first time for a weekend, I wanted to sleep with them in their bed. Of course I wasn't allowed and nobody would tell me why. Now I understand why. The bastard was banging my sister. Edit. Clarity. I refer to my cousin as sister. I enjoyed steamed beans, particularly the ones that had a little juice in them when you pop it out of the shell. So I said I like them young and wet and my family had a laugh over that. I just figured out what it means a decade later. 22 BTW. My parents took me to some kart race track because racing is awesome. The white kart was in front, so I yelled white power. People got mad and we had to leave. I guess they wanted the red car to win. When I was 6 years old, one of my friends in kindergarten wanted to suck my dong, a boy my age. Now that I look back at it, it seems kind of weird. And now you're into girls' a-holes. You're a Freudian mystery. A friend and I would sometimes hang out at the cemetery when we were younger. Not for any morbid reasons or anything, mainly just because it was a quiet place we could both easily reach, and it was remote enough to be a good place to smoke pot. One day when we were out there we saw my dad on the other side of it. He wasn't doing anything really, and after he left we went over to check the grave near where he was to see if that had anything to do with it. There weren't any new graves, and the ones that were there were way too old to be anyone he knew, so we just wrote it off. As I got older I realized what was going on. He was probably getting high there too. Exhale of relief, even I didn't realize it till the last sentence. When I was little my family and I would go up to Pennsylvania during the summer. We had a trailer in this resort place that only allowed mobile homes. I remember one night waking up scared shitless because the trailer was rocking. I knocked on my parents' bedroom door. They said it was okay, that sometimes the raccoons like to shake the trailer. That satisfied my young mind. Not until later on that I thought of it and realized that it was my parents getting it on. I was at a friend's house when I was about 10 years old. We were laughing and giggling about something. I don't remember what. I laughed so hard I peed in my pants. I was so embarrassed. I just wanted to change my pants and forget about it. She wanted to tell her mom. I begged her not to. She did anyway. I was mortified just sitting on her bedroom floor. Her mom came to the door and said, "It's okay sweetie. I peed my pants at a job interview today." I believed her and it made me feel better to think that a grown-up had gone through the same thing. A few years later it dawned on me that she only said what she did to make me feel less embarrassed. She was a stay-at-home mom. She didn't pee at a job interview. I had reoccurring dreams of crying in the tub while someone threw water in my face from a very young age. I told my mom about it in my teenage years and she told me that I had been raped by my babysitter's older son while being given a bath when I was 2. Sad story, but I feel pretty disconnected from that whole experience. It just feels like a bad dream. Edit. Thank you for all the support and questions. Do your research on childcare providers and don't be afraid to seek help if you or someone you know has been a victim of sexual abuse. Take care. Edit 2. There seems to be a lot of people who think my mom is in butt for telling me, but I already clarified that it was information that I pressed her for. She was pretty torn about telling me. She started by saying it wasn't a dream and I pressed her for more info and she told me everything. She asked how I felt afterward and even offered to take me to my therapist again. There was no bluntness about it, but she tried to make it as clinical and straightforward as she could. That traumatic event wasn't just hard for me but her as well, and so talking about it between the two of us as adults was actually relieving to both of us. I was raped when I was 5, and unless I try to focus on the details, which I try to avoid at all cost, it feels like a bad dream to me too. Thank God for fuzzy kid memories. When I was young, I lost a tooth in an Italian hoagie, or sub, grinder, big sandwich depending where you are from, and ended up swallowing my tooth. I told my parents about it, frantic that I wouldn't get my $1 reward from the tooth fairy. My dad told me that I should draw a picture of my tooth and maybe the tooth fairy would let that suffice. So I drew the tooth, and I woke up to a drawing of a $1 bill. I was confused, angry, laughing in frustration, and I didn't understand at the time is that my dad is awesome. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.